I'm Liam Sayre, and this is my Antigone trial project. So the trial I did as my example was the Pentagon Papers about Daniel Ellsberg. So in this image, the top is Judge Ray Griffine, and he was the judge. The defense was by Daniel Ellsberg, Anthony Russo, and Leonard Bolden. And the prosecution was Richard Nixon, president at the time, David Nixon, and Morton Hopper. So Daniel Ellsberg is the focus point of this trial because he was a worker for Rand Corporation who did military analysis for the U.S. Army, and he leaked the Pentagon Papers, a document that highlighted U.S. military action in Indochina, which is former Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Especially this was related to the U.S. Army and how the U.S. would commit human rights abuses in Vietnam. He gave copies of this to U.S. newspapers. He was born in Chicago in 1931. He graduated from Cranbrook School and earned a 4-year scholarship to Harvard. He studied economics at Cambridge before 1953 when he joined the Marine Corps. In 1954 to 1957, he served in the Suez Crisis, which took place between Egypt and Israel as Israel took over the Sinai Peninsula. He worked for Rand Corporation after he left the Marine Corps. So an overview of the process of the trial, prosecution lawyer for the Nixon administration was David Nixon. The defense lawyer defending Ellsberg and Russo was Leonard Bolden. Anthony Russo was important because he helped Daniel to copy the Pentagon Papers, and in addition refused to testify and was therefore sentenced to court of contempt. Linda Sunny also helped copy the Pentagon Papers, but she was an unindicted co-conspirator who did admit to seeing Russo and Ellsberg's actions. Morton Hopper was the supervisor of the Pentagon Papers task force, and he testified that he had given a version of the paper to Ellsberg in order to write a Vietnam policies document. The questionable aspects of the trial were that the U.S. government in 1972 was found to have been wiretapping phone calls between defense lawyers and the defendants. The Supreme Court decided not to hear the government's defense case and ruled that the government had committed crimes. Later, the Nixon administration hired Bay of Pigs survivors Gordon Liddy and Howard Hunt to steal documents from Ellsberg's psychiatrist in order to ruin his reputation. At the same time, the Nixon administration had also just broken into the DNC building at Watergate in Washington, D.C., starting the Watergate scandal, which would eventually lead to his impeachment. The verdict of the trial was that Judge Griffine had ruled that the government had committed gross misconduct, and all charges were dropped. At the end of the Pentagon Papers, the Nixon administration had large holes in their credibility, and many people viewed them as no longer trustworthy. And whilst Ellsberg had committed a crime, the media and populists regarded Ellsberg as a hero rather than a criminal. My opinion on the case is that even though the government had committed crimes against privacy, and Ellsberg had given secret documents, that Judge Griffine had made the correct decision in order to not rule that Ellsberg was guilty. Mainly because, although Ellsberg had committed crimes by giving away secret documents, Ellsberg only gave away parts of the documents in order to keep U.S. troops who were in Vietnam and abroad safe from secret attacks, which could have used the documents as evidence, and that these documents had been given to only U.S. newspapers rather than sold to foreign governments in order to make their future plans against America, such as the Soviet Union or Communist China. And that, although it did cause more anti-war sentiment, it was rightfully so, as the U.S. had been committing crimes in the region, and that people needed to know. These are some of the sources which I used to obtain that information.